All right, today we're going to be tearing into the Sportsman 570 transmission. In a previous video, I tore the side cover off of this transmission, pulled a couple gears out, and now we're just going to be going through and taking out this drive here as well as this main gear here. And they can be a bit of a challenge. It's the transfer gear, so we've got gears going two different directions. I'll kind of show you that when we get into it. I've removed the seal out of here already, and how I did that was, that's a steel seal with a rubber lip on it on the inside, rubbing against this shaft here. And with it being a steel seal around the outside, it can be a challenge. So what I did was drilled a hole right through it, 1/4 inch around, and then just kind of pried it out. And it'll come out. You just don't want, with it being metal, you don't want to slide that down inside the case. You don't want to take a screwdriver and tap it down in beside the seal because you're going to damage the case. So I've got that seal out already. We're going to need a couple different size snap ring pliers, and then we're going to need a T27 Torx head, and I'll show you where to use that here in a little bit. So we're going to pull 2 snap rings off here. One of them is going to be on the inside. There'll be a washer in behind it. We'll go ahead and remove that one there. And then if you can see down in there, there's a larger snap ring, and this one you want to suck it in to remove it. So, and it's a pretty good size snap ring. So pull that out there, and then there's a washer behind that one. Now you're going to want to remove that washer because what happens is that washer will slide down into that groove that snap ring was in, and it'll cause it to that shaft not to come out. So we'll go ahead and remove this washer here. That way it doesn't give us problems when we're trying to pull out that shaft. Now, the next thing we're going to do, and you can do it a couple different ways, but you want to be really careful not to damage. There's a coupling in here that holds the bearing. It's kind of a bearing holder. You want to make sure you don't damage that. So what I did was grabbed a very dull punch or a chisel. Make sure it's dull though so you don't crack anything, and just kind of loosen it. It's a threaded coupling. Just make sure you don't damage that when you loosen it. So regular thread, just turn it counterclockwise to come out, and as soon as you get it loosened up at all, it'll turn fairly easily. Now what I did was grab needle nose pliers, and there's holes all the way around this, so just take them grab the needle nose pliers, stick it in there, and you've got to turn it quite a ways. So that's why you don't want to do it with the chisel the whole time, and as loose as it is, it'll just pull right out. Now the second thing, before we do that, so I don't forget to tell you this, there is a Torx head in here and screw, and that is holding this coupling on. So you want to make sure you take and loosen that before you start unscrewing this. So that's something you want to do before you take the chisel and start tapping this out. It may turn in there, it's inside of a groove, so it may turn, but you won't be able to pull it out. So go ahead and continue spinning that until it's all the way out. Now this is just for the one shaft and this coupling here, and I'll show you how to remove the other one here in a little bit as soon as we get this out, so you can see what we are working with here. There's a lot of threads on here, so it takes a little while to pull it out. So looks like we're getting close. You can by pulling that center circlip out, or that snap ring, we wouldn't have to do those to remove this whole assembly. If you're removing the assembly, you wouldn't have to do both of those. So now just take and kind of pry it out like that, and there is the assembly here. Here's the carrier, and this is what I'm talking about, the bevel gear, the transfer gear, just an angled gear that meshes with this gear here. So that is removing that prop shaft out of there. And now we're going to take and remove this gear here. And this one is giving me fits. I went and bought a couple different size jaws. They still weren't working quite right just because of how it sits on here. So I'm going to show you what I actually did to pull it out. I took my long extension with a T27. I stuck it clear down in there and pulled. There's 4 Torx screws. I'll try to get this to stand up straight so you're able to see it here. So there's 4 Torx screws in there. I went and loosened all of those up and pulled them out. And then what I did was this bearing, I'm going to replace this bearing. And so what I was starting to do is going to pull all this assembly off right here. So what I actually did was grabbed a chisel, kind of put it in between this bearing and this gear, and started tapping it back and forth. That loosened that up, kind of broke that bearing seal down in the bottom there. And now I'm just going to take it, I'm just going to walk it out. And it may take a little bit of time, and you're going to hit on this this gear set here, but they'll kind of come out together. So keep loosening that so it doesn't bind on there. And I may have to screw a couple of these out a little bit more. So we're completely disconnected from that case. And we're going to be pulling the bearing out at the same time. So this isn't coming out. If you're just replacing this gear here or something, this wouldn't be the way to do it, but it wasn't coming off of that shaft like it should have been. We've got a clip down by this bigger gear that should have come off easier than it did, and it did not, so we're just pulling it out this way. Continue to move it back and forth to try to get it out of there. Now we're binding on these again, so continue to wiggle it. Now there is the other part of that gear, and like I said, these mesh together like this. So you want to make sure that if you replace one, you replace the other one. They're sold from Polaris together. So that is removing the drive shaft on a transmission off of a 2014 Sportsman 570, and a lot of these are the same. So keep that in mind. With this video, you can take and pull a lot of transmissions apart that same way.